Thank you very much for joining us, folks. And this program this afternoon, the Rush Business Report. With 2 days to go before the reading of the 2020 budget, folks, we want to say that we are going to be investigating down to the last dollar what is happening with the patrimony of this country. My name is Randolph Critchlow. Welcome to the Rush Business Report for today. Monday, folks, Monday, the 24th of January 2022. Welcome to those persons joining us all over the world, internationally, in the region, and right here in Guyana. Yes, Guyanese are crying out at the pumps, at the shops, at the stores, in the supermarkets. The cost of living is up, prices are up, and the only thing that is not up is their salary, and we are going to be talking about that today. We will be joined, folks. We'll be joined by the leader of the PNCR to get his perspective on the state of the Guyanese economy. Folks, we are going to be talking your money this evening. So tell a friend, share the live stream, tell a friend that we are going to be talking money with the leader of the PNCR, Mr. Aubrey Norton. Folks, you know we like to start the program the right way. Let's follow the money. Right, we are live. We are live, folks. We hope that you're sharing the live stream. We ask those persons to share in their group, share in on their WhatsApp, share in their Facebook pages, share Facebook groups. Let a friend know that we are going to be live with the leader of the PNCR. Let's get right into it, folks. 2 days to go. 2 days to go before, yes, before the reading of the 2022 budget. How are you feeling? How is this economy treating you, folks? This will be the third budget. Remember, the PPP pursued the 2020 budget. And of course, that was deemed to be an illegal move on their part. And then the 2021 budget. This is the 2022 budget. How are you feeling as Guyanese? Today, we're going to be joined by the leader of the PNCR to discuss money matters. Without any further ado, because we want to jump right into it, because these are serious issues we're dealing with, serious matters. We are going to be assessing the job that the installed administration would have done over the last 500 and something days if they have been in power. So we are going to be doing that. We're going to welcome right now the leader of the PNCR, Mr. Aubrey Norton, to the show. Mr. Norton, good afternoon. I know that you are out and about in the region, so we're happy that you're able to take this time and join the program to share with our viewers your thoughts. I don't know if you're hearing us.
I'm hearing you clear as ever.
Great, great. Thank you very much for that. Mr. Norton, let me just start with this here. I want to, as we said this afternoon, the name of the show is the Rush Business Report. I've decided that, I will be focusing primarily on the pockets of the Guyanese people. And I want your take. What is the economic scorecard that you give the PPP over the last year and a half that they've been in power? What was the economic scorecard?
The first thing that one needs to recognize is that under the People's Progressive Party, wages and salaries were raised minimally. While the wages and salaries were raised minimally, the prices are going up astronomically. What that means, in essence, when the APNU AFC was in government, we gave handsome increases to workers. That has been erased. And even the 7% pittance that the PPP would have given, that also has been erased. And so, in real terms, the real wage of the Guyanese people would have fallen. And what that means is that they have less money to buy the goods and services they need. Clearly, it is the incompetence of the People's Progressive Party that would have resulted in this high cost of living, which is unmatched when it comes to wages and salaries. And so, when it comes to increasing the earning power of the Guyanese working class, I think even the PPP will give themselves an F. Then one knows full well that if this economy is to expand and more people earn, there is need for investment in small and micro businesses. The last two press conferences we had, the PNCR called for an increase in resources towards small and micro businesses so that they can contribute to the development of the economy. The government seems focused only on cash transfer. While we believe that there should be cash transfer, like we said in our press statement, those cash transfer alone cannot do it. There has to be proper measures taken to deal with the poor, to deal with the vulnerable, to deal with the elderly, to deal with small and micro businesses, to deal with single parents, families, to deal with all the vulnerable people in the society. And the government's measures clearly are not geared to address the concerns and the interests of the poor, vulnerable, and disadvantaged. And so, in this regard, again, I think the PPP gets another F. And that is why we have outlined in the last two press conferences measures we think that the government should adopt to ensure they help our people.
Yeah, I note that, and I want to come to that because I have it here. 2 days before the reading of the national budget 2022, I know that the PNCR would have put out some budget demands, so to speak, and some of the things that you spoke about there. What are the key issues do you want to tackle? That you want to see this budget tackle?
First of all, I would like to see the threshold go up to 125,000, which would mean anybody earning 125,000 and below will not have to pay taxes. We cannot tax our people heavily and at the same time not increase wages and salaries. I would also like to see a review of the tax system in such a way that those groups I mentioned, the poor, the vulnerable, the single parent, etc., they can benefit. To put it in a nutshell, we have called for a people-oriented budget, a budget in which there are measures to help the poor. We noted that with the coming of oil, there is the tendency for those in agriculture to utilize their lands in the direction of the oil and gas sector. What that means is that there will be less agricultural production. A logical consequence of that will be increase in prices for agricultural products. And what that also means is that there will be less agricultural products being produced in the society. And that will threaten the agriculture sector. And so one of the things we did was to call for measures that will allow people to stay in agriculture and to put more people in agriculture. Under the APNU AFC, we had developed the RAIDS program, which in a number of villages, Buxton, the Barcalis, Golden Grove, etc. I mean, the PP is going on like if it is their program, but was our program from the inception. We began it, and we thought that they can put more resources into those programs and ensure that there are more people in agriculture, and ensuring that a lot of the lands are used for agriculture, resulting in an increase in agricultural production and therefore producing the agricultural products that are needed. It is also important not only to focus on agricultural production, but also on agro-processing. We need to, in this budget, allocate resources to help young people of all ethnic groups into agro-processing so that we can produce products out of our agricultural, out of what is coming out of agriculture. I mean, personally, something like ham, I do not understand why we are not in a structured way involved in ham production. And so agro-processing should play a critical role in this budget, as far as I'm concerned. The direction of the government seems to favor only the big enterprises. And I have no problem with large enterprises benefiting, but they are small in number, and the proportion of resources that go to them, in my opinion, is much larger at the expense of small farmers, small people in agro-processing. And I think we need to level the playing field. We need to put resources into the small businesses, micro businesses, and the vulnerable people, so that they can develop and contribute to the economy. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I wanted to just hone in on a few things as you're talking there about your expectations for the budget and going through the budget demands put out. Public servants increase, pre-tax 10%, post-tax 25+%. We see a $5 billion here for roads, canals, for depressed villages. And quite interestingly, this is one I want to zoom in on. 50,000 quarterly for COVID risk allowance for frontline workers. And do you believe that the one-off $25,000 COVID relief, remember we have been in COVID now over 2 years, close to 2 years, and the government has given a $125,000 for households. Some people didn't even get it. Do you believe that more needs to be done to cushion Guyanese in terms of the effects of COVID?
Well, first of all, the focus was on the frontline workers in COVID. We believe they need to be taken care of because they are at risk. And so they need the resources. We also believe that the government has failed miserably when it comes to managing COVID. We've seen them allow super spreader events at football. We have seen them being selective in the businesses they close at the stipulated time and those they allow to open until they clean. And so, and even the government in its outreach programs, they are showing no interest in the protocols. They are assembling people And I want to make the point, COVID has become a tool of repression. When the government wants, it goes out in an outreach and it puts endless people together. The minute anybody who isn't PPP or PPP inclined risks that, they are seeking to put them before the courts or to close their businesses. Now, what in essence that does is allow some to be spreaders and some to be repressed. So I think there is need for a proper task force which involves all the stakeholders, and as a society, we come up with measures to deal with COVID. In fact, if you look at what the government is doing, they have virtually opened up Guyana without saying it. And when it suits them, they operate as if there are regulations. And when it doesn't, they operate as if there are no regulations. So the government in itself is responsible for the spread of COVID-19 in Guyana, and the approach needs to change. We need an approach which recognizes the dangers, and when we put protocols in place, they should be adhered to by all. May I also point out that when the mismanagement in the way they are doing it, it also creates a breeding ground for corruption, because some policemen will go to one set of businesses and they have the capacity to pay, and they pay and they leave them. But when it comes to the small business that doesn't have the capacity to pay, they close them down. And so the injustices that are in the wider society would have also been operating in the realm of COVID. And therefore, I think there is need for a total change in the approach to COVID. In fact, in a democratic society, the Minister of Health would have resigned. But here it appears that they have the license to kill and to advertise that many more will die without facing the consequences of their mismanagement.
I agree with you 100%, but I want to circle back to my initial question about the $25,000 COVID cash grant, and whether you believe that, like the frontline workers, quarterly, that Guyanese who are out of jobs because of COVID deserve more of this, and this takes me into my question about cash transfers on a wider scale, and whether or not you are of the school of thought that believes that in a country that is oil rich, cash transfers are something that's good for the people.
Cash transfers, they have their positive, and I believe they should be done. But when we're talking cash transfer in the context of Guyana, you have to know that you're talking it in the context of a government that has shown that they are not prepared to deal with households and to be fair. They are prepared to bring their favorite tool, that of discrimination, in dealing with cash grants. We still have people who, from the first set of grants, who would not have received their money. And so, yes, I support it, but one, we have to clean up the corruption, because it has become a means of enriching PPP people and depriving people they perceive not to be PPP. That's the first problem. The second problem is that there is no structured approach to it. There is no proper audit of what is happening. And so while I support it, I'm also concerned that it has become a means of corruption rather than a mechanism for helping the Guyanese people who need help. So we're in a kind of a dilemma. On the one hand, we want it, But we know the people that are responsible for distributing it are corrupt. And a lot of the people who should benefit are not likely to benefit because of incompetence, because of corruption, and because of discrimination.
And just a note, my consideration of cash transfer wasn't at 25. I'm talking on a more considerable scale. And you are correct. The it it was shambolic, the rollout of the cash grants. I mean, it was done through the Ministry of Local Government, which was a mess in itself. So we saw that, and again, no audit. But I want to come off of that because we can't talk about the economy without mentioning sugar. The PPP would have promised during their campaign to make sugar sweet again, so to speak. We see them scaling back now. We see them continuing to pump money into sugar. Uh, I know the position of the APNU AFC was to right size the industry, but how do we move? How do we move forward? Let's say tomorrow was election and the AP and UFC got back into power. What was the move? What would be the move in terms of sugar?
First of all, I think we have to recognize the reality of the sugar industry and stop playing politics with it. Barra Jagdeo knew full well that he couldn't do what he was saying. But then this is the master of failed projects. He had Skeldon failed, Amelia Falls failed. Virtually every project that came out under Barra Jagdeo would have failed. You cannot in this society look to a successful project. He virtually ruined NIS. And so the approach has to be to recognize that the cost of production of sugar is extremely high. And we have to do what is necessary to ensure, on the one hand, we put mechanisms in place to absorb sugar workers, including putting some of them in business, which we were doing on the west bank of the Demerara. We also need to recognize that there are other industries that could emerge and absorb sugar workers. We also need to retrain sugar workers. The problem is there is a lack of a comprehensive approach to deal with the sugar industry and to deal with the sugar workers. Now, all workers in this country are entitled to earn. And if you recognize an industry is failing, and let us not forget, the PPP, when they were in government before, they had resources given to them by the EU to prepare sugar workers for the eventuality. They have squandered those resources. Then they went to the sugar workers and fooled them that they were going to rebuild a viable sugar industry when they know the problems that confronted the sugar industry. I believe we have to square with sugar workers. We have to say to you, one, we don't want you unemployed. We want to put mechanisms in place so that you can transfer into other areas, because we know you need to earn. And to have clear programs to re-educate sugar workers, find other areas of involvement for them, and also to put some of them in other business, including agriculture, so that there is some kind of a smooth transition from a dying industry into small, medium-sized and micro industries that can absorb them, utilize their productive capacity, and contribute to the development of the economy. We have seen what other crops can do in the Guyanese economy. And I pointed out in one of the press conferences that it is on the decline. And therefore, it is also an area we can place workers and help them to develop so that they become productive people in the society, rather than fooling them that you're going to revive an industry that you know full well you can't revive. Jagdeo knows full well he squandered a lot of the money. The PPP under Jagdeo squandered a lot of the money in the Skeldon Sugar Factory and a number of failed projects, including paying super salaries to people who weren't even in Guyana that were purporting to manage the sugar industry. And so we have got to take a comprehensive approach and move away from fooling Guyanese workers and telling them we're going to make sugar viable when they know it is not viable at this stage. It has to be downsized and alternative employment and businesses found for people in the sugar industry.
Right. Thanks for that. We're following some of the comments coming in from persons. Just to note, I note that the budget demands put out said that $10,000 increase for pensioners, because I see a number of persons asking, but what about the pensioners? I don't know if you want
Yes.
to touch on that before we move to the next
Well,
topic.
we believe that pensioners should have an increase. And in that press conference, I can't recall if we said 10,000 or a minimum of 10,000. I think it might have been a minimum of 10,000. We wouldn't put a ceiling. If the government can afford more, we would welcome it for our pensioners. But we believe, as things are, they need a minimum of 10. And even that cannot help cushion the high prices that they are confronting. And so we include pensioners in our proposal. We also spoke to the Guyanese worker, who we believe should get a minimum of 25% wages and salaries increases. And that we said you can give a 10% interim payout and then negotiate with the unions to get to a higher point. We know from the state of the Guyanese economy that the average man cannot survive on his earnings. And that is why we look for measures that will, first of all, reduce the amount of income tax some people pay, and in some cases, remove the income tax totally so that people have more take-home pay than what exists at present. So it is the PNCR's view that the budget must have measures that will bring relief to poor people, bring relief to the disadvantaged, bring relief to the elderly, bring relief to the youth, bring relief to women, to single parents, to all those people who need relief. And therefore, it is our expectation that certain measures will emerge in the budget. We clamored for them to expand agriculture in villages, getting more villages involved in agriculture and providing the resources and the infrastructure for those villages. We had begun, while the PPP was in government, that stretched from Buxton to Ansgrove, that were particularly Afro-Guyanese. The PPP did no drainage and irrigation. When we came to power, in a structured way, we began giving drainage, doing drainage and irrigation so that those villages can produce their agricultural products, sell them, and earn from them. We believe all villages of all ethnic groups, the government is obligated to put drainage and irrigation so that those people can utilize their lands, become productive people, and earn for themselves and contribute to the development of our country. That is all we're asking for. And I believe that we did it without oil resources. Now you have oil resources. There should be no reason why these demands cannot be met, except, of course, the PPP decides that it is an anti-working class, anti-poor people party. One of the problems the PPP has, and you're seeing it with GPL, when we put effective management at GPL, the problems were being solved, corruption was being reduced, and we saw efficiency emerging. They put back the same corrupt people, and what we're seeing at GPL is increased corruption, inefficiencies, and we are back to blackouts. And so it is the very nature of the government. I tell people, I don't worry about how much money this government dole out. Their desire for corruption, their desire to ensure that the PPP elite friends and family get wealthy ensures that they cannot allow the resources of this country to go to the people who need them. The very nature of the regime is antithetical, or it finds itself in a position where the measures that are needed to help the poor, the vulnerable, they cannot take those measures, because to take them, resources will have to go to the people, and it will not allow this corrupt elite to expand its wealth. I believe the PPP fought to come back to power, not to serve the people of Guyana, but to enrich those few. After Dr. Jagan's death and the emergence of the new, for the want of a better word, PPP regime, the whole focus has been on self-aggrandizement, on accumulating wealth for a few, on ensuring the resources of this society go to a few that are linked to the PPP. And by the very nature of how they operate, they cannot serve the people of Guyana, because to serve the people of Guyana, more resources will have to go to them. And when more resources are going to them, it reduces the amount for illegality and corruption. And since they thrive on illegality and corruption and on getting wealth at the quickest possible time, their program is in direct contradiction with serving the poor, the vulnerable, the elderly, the youth, the single parent, small and micro businesses. So the PPP is in a dilemma which it is difficult for them to come out because of the nature of their regime.
Definitely, and a lot has been said about the macroeconomic policies that they embrace, which don't necessarily favor the average man. But I want to segue now, Mr. Norton, to oil. Before First Oil, I think it was 2015, Guyana was in dire straits. We were dependent on mainly loans and taxation. Uh, but oil was like a shot in the arm for Guyanese, and a lot of people were very optimistic. Economists said that the rising tides will raise all boats, all these fanciful things we heard. But 5 years on, we've had this administration saddled. We've been saddled with this administration now for close to 2 years, and one of the recent things that they did, of course, was the amendment, so to speak, of the Natural Resource Act, which would see a more loose approach to the spending of our oil wealth. These same wealth the Guyanese have been waiting for move our country forward. I want your thoughts on that first of all. That's that aspect of our oil,
First of
natural
all,
resources.
I would go back a little. The APNUAFC was in government. We were giving public servants better wages. We were putting resources into agriculture. Agro-processing was on the rise. And we built many roads, etc., infrastructure of a higher quality than existed before. And that was because a lot of the resources were going back to the people. Now, with the coming of the People's Progressive Party, you can see from their attempt, from their dealings with the Natural Resource Fund, that they have no interest in managing oil resources for present and future generations. For them, they're going to borrow, they're going to utilize the resources, and they themselves will bring the Dutch disease to Guyana, because I do not believe that they are in a structured way working out what they will do with oil resources, how much they would utilize to put into the economy, what is the amount that they can borrow, what is the amount that should be saved, and there is no professional core of people to do clear projections of what are the incomes that will come from oil and gas, over what period, how much we will invest, and how much we will save for future generations. They are not into that kind of thing. So what you're going to see is them borrowing, spending, stealing, and we will end up where we were in 2015, even though we have oil. And so one sees a real dilemma. And let's look at oil. This government isn't even showing interest in developing the technical capabilities and competencies to, one, monitor the oil and gas industry, two, to ensure technology transfer so we will understand what is happening and prepare Guyanese for the oil and gas sector. They seem not to recognize that there is need for capacity building so that we can monitor and we can improve our ability to handle oil and gas. Additionally, we see no building of businesses with the capacity to benefit from the local content that we so celebrate. And you can have the best of local content legislation, and there are question marks there as well. But if you do not have the capacity, or very few people have the capacity to be able to benefit from it, then it will be just a document, and the real people who should benefit, that large percent of the society who should benefit in a direct way, will not benefit. And that is another dilemma we face. No institutional capacity building, no capacity building whatsoever. Take the EPA. Government should have been training, and I know we had started to train people so that you can strengthen the Environmental Protection Agency and therefore give it the wherewithal to be able to deal with the oil and gas sector. The PPP regime seems to believe that there's no place for an Environmental Protection Agency. And so for them, it's a free-for-all. I think the approach needs to change. If we are going to have a viable oil and gas sector, we need to do the work to build the capacity to monitor it and to benefit from it and to prevent environmental problems that are preventable. But you first have got to have the capacity to do it and to deal with it.
Definitely, That is so true. And viewers, if you're now joining us, we are chatting with the leader of the PNCR, Mr. Aubrey Norton, on economic matters here today on the Rush Business Report. Mr. Norton, you said something about capacity building just now, and what is being said in some circles is that they're not interested in capacity building because their friends and the cabal, they have the capacity to take advantage of the industries opened by the local content. And as we run local content, we heard, we saw in the media the uproar, from the Caribbean community or the CARICOM community over the local content bill, and how it basically selects certain industries that have to be 90% or 100% or specifically for Guyanese. And we heard lots of talk about Guyana and CARICOM and whether or not we should be in CARICOM. What was your take on that entire saga?
First of all, this issue was raised in Parliament by Member Parliament Patterson. I heard that Anil Nandalal's response was that we will deal with it at the time. Well, apparently the time is here. Again, it is a manifestation of the government's inability to look at all the various options and come up with legislation that will serve us well and not generate conflict with others. I've seen some people calling for the exit from CARICOM. I don't agree. I believe that Guyana can work out with the Caribbean proper modes of operation that will allow Guyanese to benefit while at the same time promoting regional integration. When we treat the two as if they are on a collision course, it is nearsightedness. One must also remember, and I'm not pro Trinidad, I am pro Guyana, but one of the realities was that when Trinidad had oil, they were reasonable to us. Now, as a country, we must recognize that we are part of CARICOM, we are part of the integration movement. We have obligations under the Treaty of Chaguaramas, and we have obligations as Guyanese. Our task is to work assiduously to ensure that these don't conflict and that we benefit from our oil and gas resources while at the same time promoting integration, which has positive effects in some other areas. A lot of times when people are talking, they sometimes forget that CARICOM solidarity is critical in our fight against Venezuela. So if you make it a pure economic issue and you don't see the foreign policy dimension, then the time will come when you need solidarity on other matters that are critical to Guyana, and you can't get it because you run with a tunnel view that this is happening, it affecting local content, and therefore we must pull out the CARICOM. Those, for me, are pronouncement of people who suffer from an infantile disorder. Matured people who understand integration, who understand diplomacy, who understand the need for our oil and gas sector to benefit us, while at the same time not generating conflicts for us, will take a more matured, sensible, and pragmatic approach and solve the problems.
I think we had some technical difficulty there with the leader of the PNCR, Mr. Aubrey Norton, talking today economics and the state of Ghana's economy. I'm sure we're going to reestablish connection in just a bit. We went through quite a bit. And we're starting it out. Yes, operator. Let's deal with that as we um, reestablish connection. We were talking, of course, the local content and its effect on our relationship with our CARICOM neighbors. We have a bit of headroom there. If you can just pull down the top of the lap, yeah, just take out some of the headroom. Great. Right. Yes, Mr. Norton, I know you were talking there about this tunnel vision and the knee-jerk reaction to the the noise about the local content bill, and you're saying that we can find solutions to this issue.
Well, not only should we find solutions, like I said, this matter was raised by Member Parliament Patterson. And if the government wasn't an arrogant, strong headed government, they would have listened and they would have reviewed it and take action to deal with it so that we didn't arrive at this point. A lot of times, these things can be solved by rational, negotiated solutions. And when we see these things as either or, we end up damaging ourselves. Ghana has oil, thanks, we're glad to have oil. But oil should not bring arrogance, pomposity, and what is worse, with incompetence. Oil should allow us to recognize that we have a resource that isn't going to last forever, and that we need to plan and utilize those resources to develop our economy, build relations with CARICOM and other regional integration movements so that we benefit from being part of those movements, while at the same time our people are able to benefit significantly from our resources. And I believe there is where the problem is. The short-sightedness, the lack of vision, the incompetence of this government.
And these are things that affect the average Guyanese in the pockets. The local content, it affects your ability to earn. The natural resource bill affects the development of the country. All of these topics we're discussing this afternoon comes down to how the average Guyanese are able to spend the little money that they're earning. I want to jump to our penultimate topic: local government. And people might not understand the significance of local government in the development of their community, and the economic development also of the community. But we've seen the scant disregard for the local government system, structure, and elections. And recently we saw what happened with the cleanup. The government basically has not given the city council any money for the last 2 years, and basically blame them for the state of the city. And this falls as part of the whole local government structure and what has been happening over the last 2 years. I want your thoughts on that, and maybe you can touch a bit on elections, because we want to stray too far from the economic issue.
Let me say this. First of all, the PPP has never shown a commitment to local democracy. Whenever they were in government, the only interest has been domination and control. In the first time around, they held no local government election for years and appointed IMCs. This time around, they appoint a local government minister who seems to have no interest or knowledge of local government. And he believes he has the right to direct every council. He seems not to understand that there's a rationale behind local democracy, that people in their communities know what they want, and are better suited to govern their societies. So he tells people put street light when people might need a road. It is this level of crassness that affects local government. A government that is democratic would allow the local government organs to function. They would allow them to consult with their constituencies and take decisions that are in their interests. But this government has no interest in local democracy. Its interest is in domination and control. And everything that it does cuts across local democracy and points clearly in the direction of PPP domination and control. They are responsive for nothing outside of their thinking. And that is the critical problem. While they talk democracy, they have no interest in democracy. And their behavior at the local government level tells you that. Now let's turn to PPP NDCs. The minute they find an NDC that disagrees with the diktats of Dharam Lal, they immediately target them and pressure them. So you're seeing clearly they do not believe in local democracy. They believe they at the center must determine everything that happens in the country. And because they are incompetent, because they are discriminators by nature, the systems tend to run into trouble. And so I believe that the government will do well to allow the elected local government bodies to do their bidding. Today, somebody reported to me that that this is what the person reported, that the REO in Region 10 was being appointed by the PPP, gives contracts to people that are close to the PPP, and pays little or no attention to the interests of the people of Region 10. There are a lot of people in Region 10 who have the capacity to do contracts, but it is focused on giving PPP people alone at the expense of the people of Linden. And all of these issues we have to deal with, and we will have to bring pressure to bear to ensure these REOs understand that they are clerks to the council, and they are not to determine, neither them nor Dharam Lal should determine what happens in those regions. And so that's another issue that is on the table.
As an RDC council for Region 4, and I know you know the situation and that's happening all about, where the council did not get a real input into the budget. You know, those submissions that will now form part of the national budget will be read in 2 days. And the Region 4 council, as was, said by the regional chair, they don't know what is in that budget submitted by the REO. And these are the kind of things that are affecting the people in the community, because if the councillors are on the ground and they're looking after the interests of the people, they're supposed to be able to say, okay, this street in Victoria needs crush and run. We need drains in this one. How are these local organs supposed to do their jobs? And I like what you said, bringing the pressure to ensure that these things are done in the correct manner. Let me jump straight to our final, which is not far from local government. The ministry is the same, I think. Housing. I have a real issue. I mean, this is my personal grows with how we deal with housing in Guyana. In that we sell a land at a crown and a jewel. and the average man knock his stomach, buy the land, he can't knock his stomach, move for the next 5 years, so the land is left there. I believe that is a fundamental flaw in how we deal with residential ownership and land ownership in Guyana. I want to know, I want to pick your brain on that. And of course, we had the issue with monies outstanding at housing. But how are we are we doing right by the Guyanese people in terms of housing?
Well, don't forget, let me start by saying when we were in government, you notice they are rolling out a program that is really out to resources to repair the house. Some will get houses at East Coast. That was developed.
If we're still hearing, I don't know if we're still hearing Mr. Norton there. We've again a bit of technical difficulty, but we are going wrapping up the program right now on this afternoon's edition of the Rush Business Report, talking with the leader of the PNCR, Aubrey Norton, on economic matters. We are just talking there about housing and the position that we are in with housing. Um, I personally believe that we need to rethink how we approach housing in Guyana. There are many persons who paid um, fancy amounts. I call it fancy amounts of monies for land, and the lands are just there. I believe that we need to encourage home ownership in terms of building, encourage persons to be able to build, give them low interest loans, a number of measures. But I don't think we're my operator is trying there to get back Mr. Norton. Let's wrap up the program this afternoon. Very interesting discussion. Folks, you can drop us a line in the comment section if you want a particular question answered. I know we covered a number of topics, but if there's something that you did not hear us talk about in terms of economics, let us know in the comment section right now as we prepare to wrap up the program here on the Rush Business Report. I think we're getting word that we are not getting Mr. Norton to come in again, but we had a very fruitful discussion, I must say. It has been very interesting listening to the thoughts of the leader of the PNCR on, of course, matters that will affect your pocket, matters that will affect my pocket as we get ready for the reading of the National Budget 2022 on Wednesday in the National Assembly. Of course, a number of measures proposed to by the PNCR so to as to see relief given to the Guyanese people. Folks, I think we are going to wrap up here in the program because we don't seem to be getting Mr. Norton to come in again. We want to thank him, of course, for joining the program, taking time out of his busy day. He is out of town, but still managed to come into the show and give us a good 45 minutes of interesting conversation and perspective. So we want to thank him for being a part of the program. We want to thank all of you who are watching us right now. Continue to support the program. Continue to support the programming that we have here on APNU AFC TV. Of course, at 8 p.m. this evening, join Cher Duncan in the ring for, the fight. Time to fight in the ring at 8 o'clock. You know what is you. I don't need to tell you what happens at 8 in the ring with Cher Duncan. Of course, my program, the Rush Business Report, will continue to follow the money, folks. We'll continue to uncover the numbers, and with the upcoming budget, we will be on air extra. We'll be doing some extra programming as we cover what is happening in the budget. Running broadcast doing the reading of the budget 2022, so you will be informed. Breakdown, comments, reactions from the MPs, reactions from persons in the community, in your community, out on the road. We'll be talking with business people, politicians. Everybody will be reacting to budget 2022. So I'll see you in 2 days' time on Wednesday when we start to talk about the budget. My name is Randolph Critchlow. We want to say thank you very much for being a part of the program. Thank you very much to the leader of the PNCR, Aubrey Norton, for coming in and giving his perspective on the state of the Guyanese economy. That's it, folks. Like I always say, let's continue to work together for national development, folks. Good evening.